A silent ballroom. A tray shatters. A maid on her knees hears a whisper about a ship that will burn before sunrise. The most dangerous man in the city looks down and chooses her. He locks the doors, offers protection that feels like a cage, and keeps one rule: no touch without consent. But when bullets snap across the docks, he shields her with his body and says the words no king should say. The world thinks she's nobody. Yet she finds a secret hidden in a painting, a map to a trap, and learns someone inside his circle wants her blamed, wants her gone. A rival targets her family. A social princess claims the boss for an arranged deal. And a tiny bug found on her cart turns love into suspicion at the worst possible moment. Now the maid must decide: run from the monster, who is gentle only with her, or stand beside him as the empire burns for their touch. If a man who rules by fear is willing to lose his crown for one woman, will that vow save her life, or destroy everything they could be together? The crystal chandeliers cast long shadows across the marble floor of the Lyon penthouse ballroom as dusk settled over the city. Naomi Brooks kept her head down, methodically polishing the floor near the catering station, while the elite of the city's wealthy drifted past in designer suits and evening gowns. The scent of expensive perfume mingled with champagne in the air. Her knees ached from kneeling, but she maintained her steady rhythm, invisible to the guests who navigated around her like water flowing past a stone. The catering staff bustled nearby, silver trays laden with flutes of golden champagne held high above their heads. A sudden crash shattered the refined atmosphere. Crystal flutes exploded across the floor, sending shards skittering across the marble. Naomi instinctively moved to help, her hands already reaching for her cleaning supplies. "Such a waste!" a silky voice drawled above her. Santo Ricci stood mere feet away, his expensive Italian loafers just missing the spreading puddle of champagne. He leaned close to a gray-haired man in a senator's pin, speaking in what he thought was a whisper. "The Lyon freighter won't make it past sunrise. The Stella Maris will burn beautifully." Naomi's hands trembled as she swept up the broken glass, careful to keep her movements steady despite the ice in her veins. She'd worked enough houses to know when something wasn't meant for her ears. A sharp edge caught her knuckle, drawing blood, but she didn't dare pause. The weight of observation settled over her like a heavy blanket. Across the room, Enzo Leone's dark gaze fixed on her face, then dropped to her bleeding hand. With a subtle gesture of his fingers, the room began to clear. Donors made their excuses. Staff disappeared through service doors, and suddenly the vast ballroom felt suffocating in its emptiness. His footsteps were silent on the marble as he approached. "Tell me what you heard." The command was soft but unmistakable. Naomi stood, her spine straight despite her racing heart. "The Stella Maris freighter. Santo Ricci told Senator Marshall it would burn before sunrise." Every detail. His eyes never left her face as she recounted the exact words, the time, the way Santo had smiled while delivering the threat. "May I leave now?" She kept her voice steady, professional, though her instincts screamed danger. "No." The single word fell like a stone between them. "You've become a liability, Ms. Brooks. You have two choices." He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. "Stay here, under my protection, as part of my personal staff, or leave and become prey the moment you step outside this building." The choice that wasn't really a choice hung in the air. Naomi's mind raced through scenarios, each darker than the last, but she wouldn't go down without setting terms. "I have a condition." His eyebrow raised slightly, amusement flickering across his otherwise stoic features. "You don't touch me without my consent." She met his gaze directly, refusing to back down. "Ever." A moment passed, tension crackling between them, then his lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "Agreed." The ballroom lights dimmed automatically, casting deeper shadows across the marble floor. Enzo gestured toward the service elevator, his movement graceful despite the lethal power she could sense beneath his tailored suit. "You'll stay in the staff quarters on my floor tonight." As they walked, he spoke quietly into his phone, ordering the building locked down. Naomi's temporary uniform suddenly felt like a prison sentence, even as Enzo assured her, "Just for tonight. You can make your final decision in the morning." But his tone told her the decision was already made. For both of them. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Inside, Naomi could see her reflection in the polished steel, her dark skin glowing under the warm lights, her curves highlighted by the standard-issue uniform that had seemed so ordinary this morning. Now it felt like a costume in a play she hadn't auditioned for. "Your room will be secure, Enzo said as they ascended. No one enters without your permission. He spoke as if reading a contract, each word measured and precise. My security team will patrol the floor. If you need anything, use the house phone. Dial 0. The elevator continued its smooth climb, and Naomi found herself studying him in the reflective walls. His posture was perfect, hands clasped behind his back, but she noticed the slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. This was a man who never truly relaxed. When the doors opened, the hallway before them was all muted luxury. Thick carpets in deep blues, walls in warm cream, elegant sconces casting pools of light. It was beautiful and suffocating all at once. Last door on the right, he directed, staying a respectful distance behind her as she walked. The code is 4928. Change it once you're inside. At the door, she paused, her hand hovering over the keypad. What happens to the ship? That's not your concern anymore. His voice was gentle but firm. Your only job now is to stay safe. The lock clicked open, revealing a room that was more upscale hotel suite than staff quarters. Naomi stepped inside, her shoes sinking into plush carpet. A bed with crisp white linens dominated one wall, while a sitting area with a small sofa and reading lamp occupied another. A door led to what she assumed was an ensuite bathroom. Sleep well, Ms. Brooks, Enzo said from the doorway. We'll talk more in the morning. He remained there for a moment, as if wanting to say more, then turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into silence. The corridor stretched silent and dim as Enzo led Naomi to a small room adjoining his suite. Despite its compact size, the space gleamed with the same attention to detail as the rest of the penthouse. Polished surfaces, crisp linens, not a speck of dust in sight. The door code is 7451, he said, demonstrating on the keypad. From his pocket, he produced a small device with a single red button. Panic alarm, direct line to security. Press it, we come running. Naomi took the device, its weight surprisingly heavy in her palm. Thank you. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. The bathroom's through there. You should clean up. His eyes flickered to the glass dust sparkling in her dark curls. As hot water sluiced over her shoulders, washing away the evening's tension, a sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. Wrapping herself tightly in a thick white towel, she cracked the bathroom door to find Enzo's head of security. Marcus, she recalled, standing in her room with a clipboard. Standard protocol, he explained, not looking up from his inventory. Need to document your belongings and any injuries sustained during the incident. You could have waited until I was dressed. Naomi clutched the towel closer, water dripping onto the tile. Let me see your hand. Marcus stepped forward, camera ready. Next time, knock first. Her voice carried through the open door into the hallway. Almost immediately, a different knock echoed. 3 precise taps. Enzo stood in the doorway, his presence filling the frame. To everyone's surprise, including Marcus's, he waited for Naomi's "come in" before entering. Marcus, give Ms. Brooks privacy to dress. The inventory can wait 5 minutes. His tone left no room for discussion. Marcus retreated, and Enzo's attention turned to Naomi. Your brother, Tyler Brooks, age 14, attending Madison High School? Her heart stuttered. How did you— Show her! Enzo commanded, and Marcus returned with a tablet displaying traffic camera feeds. A dark van with familiar plates crawled past a familiar street corner. Ricci's men, second pass tonight. The implications hit her like ice water. Tyler is already being moved to safety. Enzo's voice remained calm, almost gentle. Your Aunt Sarah lives in Bedford Hills, correct? My men are taking him there now. You'll both stay under protection for 72 hours while we handle this situation. Naomi's fingers trembled as she dialed Sarah's number. 3 rings felt like an eternity before her aunt's voice answered. He's right here, baby girl, Sarah said before Naomi could speak, half asleep, but safe. Ty? Her voice cracked. Hey, sis. Tyler's sleepy mumble came through. Aunt Sarah's making hot chocolate. Why didn't you tell me I was having a sleepover? Relief flooded through her so strongly she had to sit down. Last-minute thing, buddy. Be good for Aunt Sarah, okay? After hanging up, Naomi allowed Marcus to photograph her injured hand and catalog her belongings. Her mother's lighthouse necklace, carefully noted as a personal effect. She changed into sleep clothes but couldn't bring herself to crawl under the covers, instead perching on top of the duvet, fully dressed. The panic button remained cool in her palm as she listened to the quiet movements beyond her door. Footsteps approached. Enzo's distinctive measured pace, then paused. A soft thud followed, and the steps retreated. Curious, she cracked open the door to find a pair of shoes placed precisely in the center of her doorway. They were practical steel-toed work shoes with proper arch support, exactly what she needed for long hours on marble floors. No note accompanied them, just the silent acknowledgement of her needs. Outside her window, the city sparkled with its usual indifference to the dramas playing out in its towers. Naomi settled back on the bed, her back against the headboard, knowing sleep would elude her tonight. In his own room, Enzo stood at his window, hands clasped behind his back, both of them awake and alert as the city breathed around them. The minutes ticked by in the hushed darkness. Occasional footsteps in the hallway marked the security patrols, every 15 minutes, precisely on schedule. From somewhere in the distance came the muted wail of sirens, then silence again. The panic button remained steady in Naomi's grip, its presence both reassuring and a reminder of how quickly her world had shifted. She could hear the soft hum of the building's ventilation system, the barely perceptible whir of security cameras, the faint clicks and settles of a luxury high-rise at night. Every sound registered with new significance now that she understood the dangers lurking in ordinary moments. In his suite, Enzo moved with the restless energy of a man accustomed to sleepless nights. His fingers traced the edge of his desk, adjusting items that were already perfectly aligned. The monitors before him displayed various security feeds: the building's perimeter, the street below, the harbor where his freighter waited in artificial calm. Neither of them spoke, but both remained acutely aware of the other's presence, separated by a wall and a world of complications. The night stretched on, each lost in their own thoughts, but connected by the strange circumstances that had entwined their fates. The city continued its nighttime rhythm below, taxis crawling past, late-night workers heading home, early morning delivery trucks beginning their rounds. All of it seemed somehow distant now, viewed from this quiet sanctuary, high above the streets where danger prowled in unmarked vans. The blue glow of the microwave clock read 3:07 a.m. when Naomi jerked awake. Muffled footsteps echoed from the kitchen, too measured to be an intruder. She slipped from the bed, the panic button still clutched in her palm, and padded down the hallway. Enzo stood at the kitchen counter, his silhouette stark against the harbor lights filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. The smell of fresh espresso filled the air as he lifted a small cup to his lips, his attention fixed on the glowing port in the distance. "Can't sleep?" His voice was quiet, lacking its usual sharp edge. "Heard movement." Naomi lingered in the doorway, watching him track ship lights across the water. He gestured to the marble island. "Sit. We should discuss your duties." When she hesitated, he added, "Please." The please surprised her enough that she settled onto a bar stool, keeping the island between them. Enzo placed a second espresso cup in front of her. She hadn't even seen him prepare it. "Tell me the staff routine," he said, his eyes still on the harbor. "Morning turn down at 6, breakfast service at 7. Naomi wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Lunch prep by 11, dinner service starts at 6 evening, unless there's an event. Laundry runs constant. House staff doesn't enter private quarters without clearance." "Good." He finally turned to face her. "Your expectations?" The directness caught her off guard, but she straightened her spine. "3 things. First, you knock before entering my room. No exceptions." "Agreed." "Second, no orders after midnight unless lives are at stake." His lip quirked. "Reasonable." "Third," she met his gaze steadily, "I won't be displayed as bait. I'm not decoration for your power plays." Something flickered in his expression. Respect, maybe. "You have my word." He reached into his pocket and slid a keycard across the counter. "This gives you access to service corridors, laundry, and my suite only. The rest of the floor remains locked down." Naomi examined the card, noting the embedded chip. "Thank you." "Your first task," he said, finishing his espresso, "is organizing my closet. The current system is chaos." She'd glimpsed it earlier, designer suits crammed together, ties in tangles, shoes without matches. That earned her a real smile, brief but genuine. "Diplomatic way to put it." The next hour passed in comfortable silence as Naomi transformed the walk-in closet. She separated suits by color and season, arranged ties on proper racks, paired expensive Italian shoes. Everything got labeled with small, neat tags. A place for everything. Everything in its place. She learned things about him in the process. His preference for charcoal gray over black. The way he stored weapons within easy reach but out of sight. How he kept one drawer perfectly organized, cufflinks arranged by metal type, each pair in its own velvet box. The man who planned wars couldn't find matching socks, but he treated his father's gold tie pin like a holy relic. At precisely 4:28 a.m., every screen in the penthouse lit up with the same alert. Encrypted text scrolled across displays, while thermal imaging showed orange heat blooms on the deck of a ship. The Isabella, according to the header. Enzo's jaw tightened, the only visible sign of tension. "Put on those shoes," he ordered, already moving toward the door. "Follow me." Naomi rushed to comply, lacing up the steel-toed boots he'd left outside her room. By the time she reached the private elevator, Enzo had changed into tactical gear, a shoulder holster visible under his jacket. The ride down was silent except for the soft crackle of radio chatter in his earpiece. Security teams moved with practiced efficiency, clearing paths and securing exits. In the garage, an armored SUV idled between identical vehicles. Enzo opened the rear door himself, waiting until Naomi was belted in before giving orders to his driver. The convoy pulled out smoothly, acceleration pushing her back against leather seats as they headed toward the waterfront. City lights streaked past in blurs of neon and sodium vapor. Traffic parted before them like magic, or fear. Naomi watched the harbor grow closer, knowing the orange glow on those thermal images meant fire was only waiting for oxygen. Dawn would break over smoke. In the dim cabin, she studied Enzo's reflection in the window. His face had settled into hard lines, all traces of the man who smiled over espresso gone. His fingers moved in precise patterns, signing instructions to teams through cameras she couldn't see. The SUV swerved around a corner, tires catching briefly before finding grip. Naomi gripped the door handle, wondering how she'd gone from polishing marble to racing toward danger in just a few hours. The city looked different from inside Enzo's world. Every shadow held threats. Every intersection became a tactical decision. More chatter crackled through earpieces. Enzo's hands never stopped moving, conducting his silent orchestra of violence. He'd warned her she was a witness now, but she was starting to understand she was witnessing far more than one overheard threat. The harbor's industrial lights grew closer, harsh white mercury vapor creating pools of artificial day. Cranes stood like skeleton sentinels against the pre-dawn sky. Somewhere ahead, the Isabella waited with fire in her belly, and Naomi was about to learn exactly what kind of man Enzo became when his enemies moved against him. The convoy split smoothly, vehicles peeling off to block approaches and secure escape routes. Their SUV continued straight toward the docks, where armed figures already moved with purpose through the shadows. Naomi could smell salt air and diesel through the filtered ventilation system. She glanced at her watch. 4:47 a.m. Somewhere beyond the artificial glare of security lights, the sky would soon begin its slow fade from black to gray. But first would come the fire, and whatever violence men like Enzo unleashed in response to such challenges. The pier's metal groaned under Naomi's feet as she followed Enzo through the chaos. Emergency lights strobed across the water, catching the oily smoke that billowed from the Isabella's deck. Fire crews wrestled with hoses while shadowy figures moved with military precision along the ship's catwalks. "Stay here," Enzo ordered, positioning her behind a stack of wooden pallets. He signaled to a broad-shouldered man who materialized from the darkness. "Marco keeps you safe. Don't move." The guard nodded, taking up position beside her. Naomi pressed her back against rough wood, trying to track the complex choreography unfolding before her. Enzo's men moved like black water through the shadows, communicating in hand signals she couldn't decipher. A tiny red dot appeared on the pallet near her shoulder, dancing across the grain. Before she could process what it meant, Enzo was there, his body pressing her back against a steel shipping crate. His palm found her throat, not choking, just holding her still. Heat radiated from him as he angled himself between her and whatever threat he'd spotted. "Don't move!" His voice was barely a whisper, lethal and precise. His free hand flashed signals, and his men responded instantly, fanning out in formation. Naomi forced herself to breathe slowly, hyper-aware of every point where Enzo's body touched hers. His thumb rested against her pulse, which hammered beneath his skin. She could smell gunmetal and expensive cologne, could feel the controlled tension in his frame. Shouts erupted, followed by the meaty sounds of impact. Two of Enzo's men dragged a struggling figure from behind a crane housing. The person's night vision goggles glinted as they struck the concrete. Sirens wailed closer, their Doppler screech drowning out all other sound. Enzo stayed pressed against her for 3 more heartbeats before easing back. His eyes swept the area, cataloging threats and assets with mechanical efficiency. When he spoke into his comm unit, his voice was surgically calm, directing teams to secure the perimeter and contain the fire damage. But Naomi noticed something else. As the immediate danger passed and the adrenaline began to ebb, his hands trembled, just once, just slightly, before he clenched them into fists. That tiny tell fascinated her more than all his earlier displays of power. The drive back was thick with unspoken words. Enzo sat beside her this time, close enough that their shoulders brushed with each turn. The city, lights painted his profile in harsh contrasts, shadow and neon, strength and vulnerability. The silence felt alive, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. "Your fear," he said finally, his voice rough like he'd been gargling glass. "It left a mark. I can't—" He broke off, jaw working. "I can't ignore it." Naomi waited, sensing there was more. The SUV glided through empty streets while Enzo seemed to wage some internal war. "I'd give up my empire for your touch." The words fell between them like dropped stones. Enzo immediately turned to stare out the window, as if shocked by his own confession. The tips of his ears reddened. Such a human detail on a man who'd just commanded a small army. Naomi's breath caught. The weight of what he'd said, what it meant in his world, pressed against her chest. A man who controlled half the city's underground had just offered to trade it all for the simple comfort of her hands. The SUV's tires hummed against asphalt as they approached the tower. Security gates parted silently, admitting them to the private garage where everything had started just hours ago. The same soft lighting, the same efficient team of guards. But nothing felt the same. Naomi stepped onto the service elevator, hyper-aware of Enzo's presence behind her. He spoke quietly into his phone, ordering a full council session for 9 a.m. Then he turned to her, eyes softening just slightly. "Sleep," he said. "An hour. It's all either of us will get." The elevator doors whispered shut, carrying them up toward whatever came next. 1 hour until dawn. 1 hour to process how everything had shifted on that windswept pier. 1 hour to decide what to do with an empire offered up for a touch. Naomi watched the floor numbers climb, remembering the steady pressure of his palm against her throat, the way he'd put himself between her and danger without hesitation. She thought about the tremor in those lethal hands, the unexpected humanity in that moment of weakness. The man beside her had executed battle plans and protection protocols with ruthless efficiency. He'd coordinated teams of armed men with silent signals, controlled a crisis that could have cost millions. Yet his most honest moment had come in the quiet aftermath, with those 8 words that changed everything. The elevator continued its smooth ascent. In the polished steel doors, their reflections stood close but not touching, a study in contrasts. His tactical gear against her practical uniform, his weapons and her cleaning supplies, his power and her practicality. Yet something had aligned between them in the space of one chaotic night. 1 hour until sunrise. 1 hour until the man beside her had to become the untouchable Don again, commanding his council and protecting his territory. 1 hour for both of them to pretend they could actually rest after everything that had happened. The morning light spilled across the dining table, where steam curled from porcelain cups. Around the polished mahogany, Enzo's senior lieutenants sat like crows in tailored suits, their voices sharp with tension. "She's a liability," Marco insisted, tapping his fingers against the wood. Anyone who saw her at the gala could connect her to last night's incident. Vincent, the oldest of the group, nodded. "Send her away with enough money to disappear. Clean solution." Enzo sat at the head of the table, his silence more potent than their arguments. His fingers traced the rim of his untouched coffee cup, the motion deliberate and measured. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Naomi Brooks is now my personal maid, under my sole authority." He lifted his gaze, challenging anyone to object. "This is not up for discussion." The room fell silent. Even Marco's restless fingers stilled. Naomi stood near the service door, her hands clasped to stop their trembling. "I'd like to resign," she said quietly. Enzo's response was to slide a tablet across the table's smooth surface. The screen showed a traffic camera image, time-stamped from earlier that morning. A black van with Ricci plates idled 2 blocks from her brother's school. "Your brother is safe," Enzo said, his tone gentle but firm. "He'll remain that way as long as the current truce holds." The implication was clear. Her departure would shatter that fragile peace. Naomi's throat tightened as understanding settled like lead in her stomach. There was no walking away from Enzo's world without walking through him first. The choice crystallized: her freedom or her brother's safety. "I'll stay," she said, then added with steel in her voice, "My boundaries still stand." Enzo nodded, reaching for his phone. A few taps later, he showed her his revised schedule. "I've added daily breakfast meetings with you, to remember we are human." The morning light caught the silver at his temples as he turned back to his lieutenants, dismissing them with a slight nod. They filed out, leaving behind cooling coffee and unspoken tensions. Through the afternoon, Naomi threw herself into work, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of cleaning. She reorganized Enzo's suite with methodical precision, noting how the space reflected its occupant. Expensive but practical, nothing purely ornamental. The closet she'd organized earlier now held crisp rows of suits and tactical gear, the contrast stark. She learned the access codes one by one. Laundry in the east wing, gym on the lower level, pantry adjacent to the main kitchen. Each space added another piece to the puzzle of Enzo's daily life. The laundry held specially treated shirts that could stop a blade. The gym equipment showed heavy use in early morning hours. The pantry stocked protein bars and energy drinks alongside fine wines and imported chocolates. Between tasks, she texted her aunt. "How's the homework situation?" The reply came quickly. "All done. He's adjusting well. Misses you." Naomi pressed her hand against her mother's lighthouse necklace, anchoring herself in the moment. As afternoon faded, the city below transformed. Neon signs flickered to life, painting the penthouse windows in electric colors. Naomi finished the last of her duties, hyper-aware of Enzo moving through his own evening routine. The soft murmur of phone calls, the precise click of dress shoes on hardwood, the occasional pause when he passed near her workspace. At 10:12 p.m., she entered her staff room, the lock engaging with a reassuring click. Through the wall, she could hear Enzo's voice, low and controlled, discussing tomorrow night's charity auction. Words drifted through. Smoke out, arson team, controlled environment. Naomi sat on her bed, still fully dressed, and touched the cool metal of her mother's necklace again. The man in the next room commanded armies and orchestrated vengeance with the same careful attention he gave to respecting her boundaries. He'd killed without hesitation on that pier, yet adjusted his entire schedule to share breakfast with her. "I will not fall for him," she whispered to herself, even as she remembered the tremor in his hands after the firefight, the redness of his ears after his confession in the car. The promise felt hollow, like trying to hold back the tide with cupped hands. Through the wall, Enzo's voice continued mapping out tomorrow's strategies. His tone carried the same focused intensity she'd witnessed at the docks. The voice of a man who could reshape reality through sheer force of will. A man who'd offered to trade his empire for her touch. Naomi lay back on her bed, still in her uniform, and counted the ceiling tiles. The neon from outside painted patterns across the white surface, reminiscent of the way city lights had illuminated Enzo's profile during that charged car ride home. She could still feel the phantom pressure of his palm against her throat, protecting her from the sniper's sight. Could still see the way his hands had trembled afterward, that single crack in his perfect control. The voices in the next room grew quieter, discussing security positions and guest lists for tomorrow's event. Naomi closed her eyes, trying to focus on the practical aspects of her situation. Her brother's safety, her clear boundaries, the simple exchange of service for protection. But beneath those rational thoughts, she remembered Enzo's words in the car, the raw honesty in his voice when he'd offered everything he was for something as simple as her willing touch. Morning light streamed through the penthouse windows as Naomi arranged a simple breakfast on the dining table. 2 plates of perfectly scrambled eggs, whole grain toast, and fresh fruit. No pretense, no elaborate spread, just honest food meant to sustain. 10 minutes, she said firmly as Enzo approached, already dressed in a charcoal suit. "That's all I'm asking." He paused, then sat with careful precision, his usual intensity softened by something like curiosity. Naomi remained standing, hands clasped behind her back. "About my boundaries," she began, meeting his gaze directly. "When I say you must knock before entering my space, I mean every time. No exceptions unless there's immediate danger." Enzo nodded, picking up his fork. "Reasonable." "And physical contact," she continued, watching him take a bite of eggs. "Even accidental touches need consent. I won't be grabbed, guided, or maneuvered without my agreement." A slight smile touched his lips, but his eyes were serious. "You're very specific about your terms." "I have to be. Clear boundaries keep things safe." "Safe," he repeated, testing the word. "Yes, I understand. I agree to your terms." After breakfast, Enzo led her to the security station, where multiple screens displayed feeds from around the building. He stood behind her chair, careful not to touch. "Watch this car," he instructed, pointing to a silver sedan. "See how it maintains the same distance from our vehicles? That's a tail." Naomi leaned forward, absorbing details. And those 3 black SUVs. Gap and go method. The target vehicle switches positions while the others maintain formation. Makes it harder to track. For the next hour, she practiced identifying patterns in the lobby traffic. That man's been through 3 times, she noted. Different code each time. Good catch, Enzo approved. What else? The woman with the red bag. She's trying too hard to look casual, and that delivery service has used 2 different uniforms today. He nodded, pleased with her observations. The morning passed in similar instruction, Enzo teaching her the subtle language of security and surveillance. Around noon, while organizing the study's reading materials, Naomi found a thin manila folder mixed in with lifestyle magazines. She almost filed it away until a date caught her eye, the night Enzo's brother died. Her hands trembled as she read. Police reports documented massive blood loss, multiple stab wounds. Medical records showed the time of death, 9:47 p.m. A council meeting had been scheduled for 9:30. The folder included witness statements suggesting an information leak had led to the ambush. Naomi returned the folder exactly as she'd found it, but the knowledge settled heavy in her chest. Enzo's insomnia took on new meaning. Those hours between 9:30 and 9:47 p.m. must replay endlessly in his mind. Throughout the afternoon, she prepared for the evening's charity auction. Her uniform was meticulously pressed, every crease sharp enough to cut. She twisted her hair into a secure knot at the nape of her neck, professional and practical. At her throat, she fastened her mother's necklace, a delicate silver lighthouse that had survived foster homes and temp jobs, a reminder of constancy in chaos. The pendant disappeared beneath her collar, invisible but present, like so much in this new life. Enzo was waiting by the private elevator when she emerged, his bow tie perfectly straight, cufflinks catching the light. He looked dangerous in the way fine things often did, beautiful but lethal. Ready? He asked, maintaining the careful distance she'd requested. Yes, she replied, stepping into the elevator. As they descended, she noticed his reflection in the polished doors, the way his eyes flickered to her and away, respecting her boundaries while clearly wanting to breach them. The doors opened onto controlled chaos. The charity auction buzzed with wealthy energy, crystal glasses catching light, jewelry flashing like armor. And there, directly in their path, stood Valentina Moretti. Naomi had seen photos in society magazines, but they didn't capture the precise calculation behind Valentina's beauty. She moved with practiced grace, pressing a cool kiss to Enzo's cheek. Her gaze swept over Naomi and dismissed her completely, as if she were merely another piece of the hotel's furniture. The interaction lasted seconds, but spoke volumes. Valentina's designer dress and perfect posture declared her place in this world. Her kiss marked territory, while her dismissal drew boundaries. One's very different from the careful lines Naomi had established that morning over eggs and toast. Standing slightly behind Enzo, Naomi felt the weight of her uniform, the hidden comfort of her mother's necklace. She saw the way Valentina's hand lingered on Enzo's arm, a touch he hadn't consented to but couldn't refuse in this public space. She noted how his shoulders tensed slightly, the same way they had when he spotted the tail car that morning. The lobby glittered with wealth and danger, a perfect illustration of the world she'd stepped into. Valentina's presence completed the picture, adding layers of social complexity to the physical threats Naomi had spent the morning learning to identify. This was a different kind of surveillance, a different kind of protection needed. As they moved into the crowd, Naomi recalled the medical reports hidden in the study. She understood now that death could come from boardrooms as easily as back alleys, that betrayal wore evening dress as comfortably as tactical gear. The brothers' blood had spilled because of a council leak, and here was Valentina, the council's choice, marking her claim with a kiss. The charity auction sparkled with calculated excess. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across silk gowns and platinum watches, while numbered paddles danced through the air, moving obscene sums between numbered accounts. From her position near the refreshment station, Naomi kept linen napkins stocked while mapping the room's power dynamics. She'd worked enough high-end events to read the subtle hierarchies, who deferred to whom, which conversations stopped when certain people passed. But tonight she watched with new understanding, seeing past the glamour to the carefully orchestrated money flows beneath. A waiter bumped her elbow, muttering an apology as she steadied her tray. The collision gave her a clear view of a large, abstract canvas being positioned for the next lot. Something about the wooden stretcher bars caught her eye, a distinctive diamond-shaped brand she recognized from her temp days cleaning a warehouse in the industrial district. That mark had been stamped on crates that definitely weren't holding art supplies. Moving closer, under the pretense of gathering empty glasses, she studied the painting. The canvas was decent quality, but the frame was museum grade, far too expensive for the mediocre work it held. The disparity clicked into place. The frame wasn't protecting art, it was concealing data. 2 bidding paddles lay on a side table nearby, momentarily abandoned by their owners, who were deep in conversation about yacht moorings. With practiced efficiency, Naomi swapped their positions while arranging fresh napkins. The move would ensure the painting landed with whoever held paddle number 47, Enzo's number for the evening. She felt his attention sharpen across the room, though he gave no obvious sign of noticing beyond a slight lift at the corner of his mouth. When the abstract came up for bidding, he played his role perfectly, affecting mild interest until the price climbed high enough to seem natural when he won. Valentina's perfectly manicured hand tightened on her champagne stem as the gavel fell. "Such unique taste, darling," she murmured to Enzo. "Though perhaps we should discuss your recent acquisitions at our meeting tomorrow." He merely nodded, already turning away to arrange delivery of his purchase. Naomi noticed how Valentina's smile thinned at the dismissal, how her eyes tracked Enzo's movements with the focus of a sniper scope. The drive home was tense with anticipation. As soon as the SUV's privacy barrier rose, Enzo snapped the frame with surgical precision, extracting a hair-thin microchip from behind the canvas. His tech specialist connected it to a tablet, projecting files onto the tinted window. Shipping manifests, cell phone networks, and detailed plans for an ambush scheduled within 48 hours. Valentina's texts lit up Enzo's phone in rapid succession. "We need to discuss the Milan merger. The council expects an answer. Don't ignore me, darling." He switched the phone to silent without reading further, focused entirely on the intel Naomi's intervention had secured. His fingers moved across the tablet, marking key locations and timing windows while his security team took rapid notes. "The warehouse district again," he muttered. "They're getting predictable." "Not the same warehouse I cleaned," Naomi offered quietly. "But close. That area has dozens of empty buildings, poor sightlines from the street." Enzo glanced up, reading between her words. "You've mapped it before." "I notice things. It's part of the job." She shrugged. "Clean enough places, you learn which corners hide trouble." The SUV pulled into the private garage well past midnight. The underground. Space hummed with activity as Enzo's crew prepped for the pre-dawn raid, checking weapons and reviewing building plans. Naomi watched them work with the same efficient focus she brought to her own tasks, each person knowing their role, no movement wasted. "Thank you," Enzo said quietly, standing close enough that only she could hear, "for seeing what needed to be seen tonight." "I didn't do it for thanks," she replied. "I did it because it was right." He nodded, understanding. "Still, you've earned any request you'd care to make." Naomi considered carefully. "I'd like women on my security rotation, at least 2. "Done!" He snapped his fingers, and 2 female guards materialized from the shadows. One tall and lean as a blade, the other compact but radiating contained power. Both moved with the liquid grace of predators. "Maria and Sophia will coordinate your protection detail." "Sir," Maria acknowledged, "we've already reviewed the staff access routes and scheduled alternating shifts." "Good." Enzo turned back to his tactical team. "I want that warehouse swept clean before sunrise. Full containment protocol." His voice hardened. "No survivors this time." Naomi watched the garage transform into a staging ground, gear being distributed with practiced efficiency. The women flanking her were alert but not hovering, professional but not cold. She thought of the medical reports hidden in Enzo's study, of Valentina's possessive touches, of all the ways betrayal could wear a friendly face. The night air carried the first hint of pre-dawn chill as engines rumbled to life. Enzo's crew moved with deadly purpose, loaded for war. Above them, the charity auction's crystal lights still sparkled, champagne still flowed, while below, the real work of empire ground forward in steel and shadows. The warehouse loomed against the pre-dawn sky, a hulking shadow pierced by weak security lights. Naomi sat in the SUV's backseat, her breathing shallow as Maria kept watch beside her. Through the bulletproof glass, she could see Enzo's silhouette moving with liquid grace, his team spreading out in practiced formation. The first shot cracked the silence like thunder. The ambush sprung too early, Ricci's men emerging from hidden positions with desperate intensity. Naomi's fingers dug into the leather seat as Enzo pivoted, his movements precise and deadly. 2 attackers rushed him from opposite sides. He dropped the first, with a knife strike so fast it barely registered, then snapped the second man's neck in one fluid motion. The violence was intimate, almost beautiful in its efficiency. Naomi couldn't look away, Her body trembled, but her eyes remained fixed on the deadly dance unfolding before her. Enzo moved like death itself, each strike calculated, each step measured. When the last echo of gunfire faded, 5 bodies lay still on the concrete. The warehouse fell silent except for the rapid breathing of survivors. Enzo stood motionless in the center of the E. Carnage, his suit barely wrinkled. But as he holstered his weapon, Naomi saw the telltale tremor in his hands. The same shake she'd witnessed at the docks. The mask of control slipping just enough to reveal the man beneath. Back in the SUV, before he could hide behind his walls again, Naomi reached for his wrist. His pulse raced under her fingers like a trapped bird. She said nothing, simply held on, anchoring him as his breathing slowly steadied. "My brother, Carlo," he said finally, voice rough. "The night he died, I was in a council meeting, a stupid fucking budget discussion." His free hand clenched. "They told me he was critical, bleeding out. But I stayed to finish the meeting, thought I had time." Naomi's thumb traced circles on his skin, encouraging without pushing. "By the time I reached the hospital," he swallowed hard. "The doctor said he'd been asking for me. His last words were, 'Where's Enzo?'" The confession hung heavy in the pre-dawn darkness. "The crown weighs more now. Every decision, every move, I see his face. This kingdom ate my family whole, and I'm the one who fed it." Naomi listened without judgment, hearing the guilt that drove his insomnia, the penance behind his rigid control. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her other hand to cup his jaw. The touch was gentle but firm, explicit consent given freely. Enzo went still under her palm, eyes closing as if in prayer. "You were doing what you thought was right," she said softly. "The weight doesn't have to crush you." He turned his face into her touch, the gesture almost reverent. This dangerous man who dealt in death and empire treated her freely given comfort like a holy thing. The intimacy of the moment wrapped around them, more profound than any violence. The sky was beginning to lighten as they returned to the penthouse, the first hints of dawn painting the horizon in watercolor shades. They rode in silence, but something fundamental had shifted between them. They'd each revealed vulnerabilities, shared truths that couldn't be untold. In the kitchen, Naomi began breakfast preparations with hands that shook slightly before finding their rhythm. The familiar routine of measuring coffee grounds and heating water helped steady her nerves. She could still feel the phantom sensation of Enzo's skin under her palm, still see the way he'd yielded to her touch. She was carefully plating eggs when Enzo paused in the doorway. His presence filled the space without crowding it, and when she looked up, his eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. "I need you to know something," he said, voice low and serious. "You will never be bait in my games, never a pawn to be sacrificed." He took a careful step closer. "And if you ever say stop for any reason, everything stops. Immediately. No questions asked." The promise carried the weight of an oath. Naomi met his gaze steadily, reading the truth in his eyes. She nodded once, a simple acknowledgement that carried layers of meaning. She believed him, not because he was trustworthy, but because she'd seen the man behind the mask, the one who trembled after violence, who carried his brother's death like a crown of thorns, who treated her boundaries with reverence. The morning light spilled across the kitchen floor, warming the space between them. Naomi returned to plating breakfast, her movements now smooth and certain. The air hummed with unspoken understanding. They were no longer simply Dawn and Maid, protector and protected. They had become something more complicated, more honest. The scent of coffee and eggs filled the kitchen as the city stirred to life beyond the penthouse windows. In the quiet morning light, they had carved out a moment of truth between darkness and dawn, violence and tenderness, a space where trembling hands could steady and masks could slip, where touch could be both consent and salvation. Morning light spilled across the penthouse kitchen as Naomi wiped down the counter, the rhythm of cleaning grounding her after the warehouse chaos. The repetitive motion, spray, wipe, circular polish, settled her frayed nerves, each completed surface bringing a small measure of order back to her world. She felt Enzo's presence before she saw him, that familiar electric awareness prickling along her skin like the air before a thunderstorm. "Coffee's still hot," she said without turning, catching his reflection in the polished chrome of the espresso machine. The rich, earthy aroma still hung in the air, mingling with the citrus scent of her cleaning solution. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The fine wool of his suit sleeve brushed against her bare arm as he reached past her for a mug, a whisper of contact that sent goosebumps racing across her skin. "Thank you for earlier, for understanding," he murmured, his voice low and intimate in the morning quiet. His eyes, usually sharp as cut steel, held something softer when they met hers. When she turned to face him, she found herself caught between the marble counter and his broad chest, close enough to detect the faint scent of his cologne. Sandalwood, and something darker, exclusively his. His eyes dropped to her lips, darkening with intent, pupils expanding until only a thin ring of brown remained. The air grew thick with possibility, charged like the moment before lightning strikes. "May I?" he asked, voice rough with restraint, his hands hovering near, but not touching her, waiting for permission. Her breath hitched in her throat. The world narrowed to just this moment, just this man standing before her, powerful and dangerous, yet asking, not taking. "Yes." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to retreat, each millimeter an exercise in control. His hand came up to cradle her jaw, thumb brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness that belied the calluses she could feel against her skin. Their lips were a whisper apart, his breath warm against her mouth, when he suddenly stilled, tension rippling through his frame. "No," he said softly, pulling back though his hand lingered on her face, his touch feather-light as if she were made of something precious. "Not like this." Confusion and hurt flickered across her features before she could mask it, the rejection stinging despite her best efforts. She tried to step back, but the counter prevented retreat. "Your hands are still shaking from the warehouse," he explained, his thumb tracing one last caress before dropping away, leaving a ghost of warmth on her skin. "When you say yes, I need to know it's not adrenaline talking, that you're choosing this, choosing me, with clear eyes." His gaze held hers, unflinching and intent. "I need you certain." The consideration in his voice, the respect for her autonomy even when desire clearly burned in his eyes, made something warm unfurl in her chest. This man who commanded an empire with iron control was putting her needs before his wants, her clarity before his desire. "I have meetings," he said regretfully, straightening his already immaculate tie. "We'll talk later." She nodded, watching him leave with measured steps that spoke of careful restraint, his shoulders squared as if bracing against an invisible weight. The almost kiss lingered in the air like perfume, an unfinished melody waiting for its resolution. The kitchen felt emptier somehow after his departure. Naomi resumed her cleaning, mind replaying the moment on loop, the gentleness in his touch, the heat in his eyes, the discipline in his withdrawal. She was still lost in thought when her phone buzzed an hour later, vibrating against the counter where she'd left it. An unknown number flashed on the screen. The message made her blood run cold. "Your foster father misses you. Time to come home, little girl." Her stomach clenched, memories she'd tried to bury surging up like bile. The cramped bedroom with its broken lock, his heavy footsteps in the hallway at night, the way no one believed her when she finally spoke up. She gripped the counter edge until her knuckles whitened. Attached was a photo that stopped her breath. Roth, Enzo's trusted consigliere, clasping hands with Santo in what was clearly a secret meeting. Their heads were bent close in conspiratorial alliance, Santo's flamboyant gold rings glinting in the dim light. The betrayal was obvious, but the implications were staggering. How could she tell Enzo that his right-hand man was dealing with the enemy? She saved the photo and deleted the message, a mind racing through possibilities and consequences. Without context or proof of timing, the photo alone wasn't enough. She needed more evidence before potentially shattering the trust between Don and consigliere, especially when Enzo was already stretched thin with external threats. Throughout the afternoon, she moved through her usual routine with hypervigilance, studying security camera angles with new intensity while she cleaned. She noted the 10-second delay in the feed switching between the east and west hallways, the blind spot near the service elevator, the guard who consistently checked his phone during the third hour of his shift. Each shadow seemed to hold potential threats now, each closed door a possible ambush. Her phone chimed again as she was folding freshly laundered towels, this time her aunt's number. "Math test today!" Her brother's voice bubbled through the speaker, bright with excitement. "Got a B+. Ms. Johnson said my work on fractions was exceptional. When are you coming to visit? Aunt Celia made that pasta thing you like." "Soon," she promised, throat tight with longing and fear. Her hand gripped the lighthouse pendant at her throat. "Keep working hard, okay? I'm proud of you." She wanted to warn him, to tell him to be careful, but what could she say that wouldn't terrify a 12-year-old boy? After hanging up, she methodically checked the penthouse security feeds, noting patterns in guard rotations and blind spots. She committed to memory which guards seemed alert and which were complacent, which doors had direct sightlines to cameras and which offered moments of privacy. Knowledge was power, and she needed every advantage. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and crimson when she laid out Enzo's suit for his evening meeting, charcoal gray Italian wool that probably cost more than her yearly salary. The fabric felt like liquid under her fingers as she checked for any imperfections. Her fingers smoothed the lapels with practiced care, lingering over the subtle pinstripe detail. On impulse, she took a small note card from her pocket and wrote in clear script, "Breakfast, human, don't forget." She slipped it into his jacket pocket, a reminder of their morning ritual, of the humanity they were both trying to preserve amid the violence and fear, a small anchor to the normal world they both pretended existed. Moving to her room, she texted herself, "After meeting, tell him everything. No more secrets." She stared at the message for a long moment before setting the phone aside. Then she triple-checked her door locks, testing each one twice, the routine comforting even as worry gnawed at her gut. She positioned the desk chair under the doorknob, an old habit from foster homes with unreliable locks. The digital clock read 9:40 p.m. when she finally settled in for the night, unaware that across town, Valentina was crafting a weapon from half-truths that would target the very foundation of Naomi's newfound confidence. In a penthouse even more opulent than Enzo's, the elegant woman was sifting through surveillance photos, selecting those that told exactly the story she wanted told. Naomi sat on her bed, fingers tracing the lighthouse pendant at her throat, her mother's necklace, worn smooth by years of nervous handling, a reminder of simpler times when love didn't come tangled with danger. The almost kiss played on repeat in her mind, along with Enzo's careful restraint. The warmth of his palm against her cheek, the intensity in his gaze, the roughness in his voice when he asked permission. Even as the memory warmed her, questions circled like hungry wolves. How deep did Roth's betrayal run? Was her foster father really looking for her, or was it just another manipulation? And how could she protect both Enzo and her brother while navigating this dangerous maze of loyalty and lies? The city lights winked beyond her window, secrets and promises dancing in their glow. Sirens wailed in the distance, someone else's tragedy unfolding in the night. In the quiet of her room, Naomi allowed herself one moment of vulnerability, one deep breath of uncertainty before squaring her shoulders. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. For now, she had locks on her doors, a plan forming in her mind, and the memory of Enzo's gentle touch to carry her through the night. The next morning dawned with steel-gray clouds threatening rain. Naomi was organizing Enzo's closet when the private elevator chimed. Valentina stepped out, her Louboutins clicking against marble, wearing a cream suit that probably cost more than Naomi's yearly salary. "Oh, good, you're here," Valentina said, as if Naomi's presence was a convenient afterthought. "Help me select ties for the council meetings next month. The colors need to be appropriate." Naomi kept her face neutral as she opened the tie drawer. Valentina ran manicured fingers over silk, pausing at a deep burgundy one. "This would be perfect for the marriage alliance announcement," she said, voice carrying deliberately to where Naomi stood. "The council is quite insistent about formalizing things next month. You know how traditions are in our world. Everything must be proper." The word proper dripped with meaning. Naomi's hands didn't shake as she arranged ties, but her chest felt tight. "Of course, arrangements like these require discretion," Valentina continued. "Temporary distractions must be handled delicately." Naomi refused to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. She methodically completed the tie organization, each fold precise despite the ache building behind her ribs. After Valentina finally left, Naomi threw herself into cleaning with mechanical efficiency. She was wiping down her supply cart when something caught her eye, a tiny metallic glint under the bottom shelf. Her fingers found a button-sized device, barely visible against the dark metal. Ice slid down her spine as she recognized it as a surveillance bug. Someone had used her own cart to plant listening devices in Enzo's private spaces. How long had it been there? How many conversations had it captured? She swept the suite systematically, finding 2 more bugs, one behind a lamp, another under the bedroom dresser. Her mind raced. This wasn't just a breach of privacy, it was a calculated move, using her position against them both. When Enzo returned that afternoon, his suit dusty from the safe house raid, she had the bugs sealed in a plastic bag on the kitchen table. But before she could explain, his expression hardened as he saw the devices. "How long?" he asked, voice arctic. "I just found them," Naomi said. "They were planted using my cart." "And you expect me to believe you didn't know?" His control was slipping, revealing raw hurt beneath. That you just happened to discover them today? I would never— She stopped, realizing how damning her next words would sound, but they tumbled out anyway. I got a text yesterday about Roth meeting Santo. I didn't tell you because I wanted proof first. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. You hid information about my consigliere, he said slowly. And now I find surveillance equipment in my private quarters. Please listen. To more secrets? His laugh was harsh. How many others are you keeping? That's not fair, her voice cracked. I was trying to protect— Protect who? He cut in. Because from where I stand, you've compromised everything. The words hit like slaps. Naomi's chest was so tight she could barely breathe. She wanted to scream that she was scared of being wrong, scared of being right, scared of losing him. But pride and hurt locked the words in her throat. I think it's best if I leave, she said instead, each word careful and controlled. His silence was answer enough. She packed efficiently, just essentials in a small bag. Her movements were precise, her face blank as she stepped into the elevator. The camera's red light blinked steadily, recording her departure. The lobby felt exposed, all marble and glass. She pushed through the revolving door, intending to hail a cab to her aunt's place. But something made her pause. A gray van idling across the street, its sliding door slightly ajar. Before she could step back inside, two men emerged from the morning crowd. One grabbed her arm while the other opened the van door wider. She tried to wrench away, but their grip was professional, practiced. The lobby guard was reaching for his weapon, but it was already too late. They had her in the van before he could clear the holster. The door slammed shut with terrible finality. 15 seconds later, the private elevator opened and Enzo burst into the lobby, gun already drawn. But all he found was an empty sidewalk, a startled guard, and tire marks still fresh on the wet pavement. He turned on his security team, his voice building like thunder before a storm. I want every traffic camera in the city, track that van minute by minute, lock down all bridges, tunnels, every route to the river. His orders cracked like lightning. No one sleeps until we find her. But the gray van was already merging into traffic, carrying Naomi deeper into the maze of city streets while rain began to fall. The security feeds showed what they had both been too proud to say. Her looking back at the elevator camera, his hand hitting the call button moments too late. Both of their faces holding the same expression. Fear finally breaking through their carefully maintained masks, revealing the truth they'd been too stubborn to speak. The Lyon conference room blazed with harsh fluorescent light, turning the mahogany table into a river of blood. Enzo stood at its head, his shadow stark against cream walls as he held up the marriage contract between two fingers. This arrangement, he said, voice carrying to every corner, is terminated. The paper tore with surgical precision. Pieces fluttered to the table like dead leaves while council members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Valentina's uncle started to protest but went silent at Enzo's glacial stare. And you? He turned to Roth, who had gone paste white. Explain the photographed meeting with Santo Ricci. A misunderstanding, Roth stammered. I was gathering intelligence by selling mine. Enzo's tone could have frozen hell. How long have you been feeding information to our enemies? When Roth lunged for the door, two guards caught him before he cleared his chair. Enzo nodded to his security chief. Take him to the basement. Full interrogation. I want every detail of his arrangement with Santo, every piece of intel he sold, every contact he burned. As Roth was dragged out, Enzo activated the emergency broadcast system that would reach every Lyon-affiliated channel in the city. His voice was controlled, measured. To Santo Ricci, I offer myself in exchange for Naomi Brooks. My life for hers. No conditions, no tricks. Direct response only. The council erupted in protests, but Enzo silenced them with one raised hand. Meeting dismissed. Get out. Once alone, he called Naomi's aunt, keeping his tone gentle despite the rage still simmering beneath his skin. Keep him home today. Stomach flu. Has anyone unusual been watching the house? A black sedan this morning, she said. Tinted windows. Didn't recognize it. Protection is already en route. Don't open the door for anyone but my people. They'll have the code phrase we discussed. Across the river, in a concrete room that smelled of mildew and old fear, Naomi sat zip-tied to a metal chair, while Santo circled like a shark scenting blood. Your mother, he said, savoring the words, was quite useful to us. Small-time money laundering, nothing fancy, but she had such a gift for making dirty cash look clean. Naomi kept her spine straight, her voice steady. She did what she had to do to feed her children. And now everyone will know the Brooks family's true nature. Santo's smile was razor-sharp. The maid who caught a Don's eye, nothing but criminal stock playing at respectability. My mother's choices were her own, Naomi said. Just like mine are mine. You can't shame me with her past. I claim every part of my name. Santo's smile faltered at her calm defiance. He hadn't expected dignity in place of denial. Meanwhile, Enzo stood in the tactical room, surrounded by screens showing traffic camera feeds. His men had already found 3 burner phones discarded along major routes, creating a triangle of possible locations. Cross-reference with properties owned through Ricci shell companies, he ordered. Focus on industrial zones with river access. He selected his rescue team personally, men who owed him their lives, whose loyalty was written in blood and saved families. Marco, whose sister he'd extracted from a trafficking ring. Diego, whose son received experimental cancer treatment on Leone funds. 6 others with similar debts of honor. They armed silently, checking weapons and comms with practiced efficiency. Enzo strapped on his own tactical gear, each piece a ritual of focus. The weight of the Kevlar centered him, turned fear into cold purpose. In his private office, before joining his team, he recorded a voice message on an encrypted line. His words were raw, stripped of pretense. Naomi! He paused, gathering truth like broken glass. I choose you over everything. The empire, the power, all of it means nothing compared to your safety. I'm coming for you, and when I find you, if you'll let me, I'll spend my life proving that choice every day. He tucked the phone away, face settling into an expressionless mask as he stepped into the gathering dark. The night air carried the scent of rain and gunmetal as his team moved out, shadows among shadows, carrying death for anyone who stood between them and their target. Behind them, the city sparkled with false promises, while ahead, storm clouds gathered over the river. Somewhere in that darkness, Naomi waited, and Enzo Leone, who had spent years building walls around his heart, would tear down every one of them to bring her home. His fingers brushed the phone in his pocket, feeling the weight of unsent words. Then he signaled his team forward, leaving the light behind as they melted into the growing dark. The tactical channel crackled with coordinates and confirmation codes. Intel reported movement at 3 waterfront warehouses. Surveillance drones tracked heat signatures through thermal imaging. Every piece was falling into place for the strike that would either save everything or destroy it all. Enzo checked his weapon one final time, the familiar motion grounding him in the moment. His team waited for his signal, their trust a tangible thing in the night air. They had seen him lead through firefights and ambushes, but this was different. This was personal, in a way that changed everything. The radio clicked twice, confirmation that the target building was identified. Enzo raised his hand, ready to give the advance order that would start it all. In that suspended moment, he thought of breakfast rituals and quiet strength, of boundaries respected and trust earned, of a woman who saw past his power to his humanity and demanded he remember his own. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, a hulking shadow crowned with broken windows. Inside, Naomi tested her zip-tied wrists, mind racing as she counted guard patterns. 3 men by the loading bay, 2 more circling the upper catwalks, all following a lazy 5-minute rotation that left blind spots, if you knew where to look. And Naomi knew. She'd cleaned places like this for years, learning every corner and crevice. Her eyes locked on the utility cart nearby, its lower shelf stocked with industrial cleaners. Lye, bleach, caustic solutions, and innocent spray bottles. Your Don will be here soon, Santo gloated, pacing, walking right into our trap like the lovesick fool he's become. Naomi said nothing, fingers working steadily at the zip ties while she watched the cart. One good push was all she'd need. The cleaning supplies were her weapons. She just had to wait for the right moment. The first explosion rocked the building's foundation. Gunfire erupted from multiple points as Enzo's team breached. Through the chaos, Naomi spotted movement. Roth emerging from shadow, gun raised at Enzo's exposed back as he cleared the entrance. She didn't hesitate. Throwing her weight sideways, she toppled the cart into Roth's legs. The impact sent him stumbling as bottles crashed and chemicals sprayed. Her aim was perfect. The caustic mixture hit his face and eyes. His scream gave Enzo the split second he needed to spin and fire, the shot echoing off concrete walls. The warehouse dissolved into close-quarters combat. Enzo's hand-picked crew moved like a coordinated storm, precise and lethal. Bodies fell. Blood-painted concrete. Through gunsmoke and emergency lights, Naomi saw Santo bolt for the catwalks. Enzo pursued him up the metal stairs, movements predatory and controlled. Santo fired wildly, bullets sparking off railings. On the narrow walkway above black water, Enzo cornered him. 3 fluid motions ended it: disarm, disable, dispatch. Santo's body hit the river with a distant splash. Silence fell, broken only by distant alarms and the hum of industrial fans. One of Enzo's men cut Naomi's wrists free while medics checked the wounded. She flexed her hands, watching Enzo descend the stairs. He crossed to her through wreckage and shell casings, then went to one knee in the filthy concrete. His forehead touched hers, breath unsteady. "Say the word," he whispered, "and I walk away from all of it. The crown, the empire, gone. Just say it." Naomi cupped his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. "I don't want your empire," she said softly. "I want you." The laugh that broke from him was raw, equal parts relief and revelation. He pressed a kiss to her palm, then rose to his feet, shoulders straightening as he shifted back into command. "Clear the building," he ordered. "Full sweep every floor. I want all bodies identified and documented. Archive everything: computers, phones, papers. Nothing leaves without being logged." He turned to his second. "Call the safe house. Tell her Aunt will have Naomi there by weekend to see her brother." Teams moved with practiced efficiency, securing scenes and gathering intelligence. Medics treated minor wounds, while tech specialists downloaded hard drives. Through it all, Enzo kept Naomi close, as if afraid she'd vanish again. The convoy rolled out just before midnight, cutting through empty streets toward the city's glowing heart. In the SUV's quiet, Naomi's fingers found Enzo's on the leather seat between them. His grip was gentle but sure, an anchor in the storm they'd weathered. "Tomorrow at noon," he said quietly. "We tell the inner circle everything. No more secrets, no more lies." Naomi nodded, watching city lights streak past. "Together?" "Together." His thumb traced her knuckles. "We face them as one or not at all." The vehicle hummed through darkness, carrying them toward whatever morning would bring. Behind them, evidence teams worked through the warehouse wreckage, piecing together the full scope of Santo and Roth's betrayal. Ahead lay questions and consequences, power shifts and new alliances. But in that moment, in the space between heartbeats, there was just this. 2 people who'd chosen each other above empires and expectations, finding their way home through the dark. They rode in comfortable silence, the city scrolling past in neon blur. Naomi's lighthouse necklace caught the passing lights, a reminder of where she'd come from and what she'd survived. Enzo's phone occasionally lit with updates from his team, casualty reports, intel summaries, security confirmations. The SUV's armor felt like a cocoon, holding them safe in this liminal space between crisis and aftermath. Tomorrow would bring decisions and declarations. Tonight was for quiet recovery, for processing the violence and victory, for simply breathing in the fact of survival. Enzo's security detail maintained tight formation around their vehicle, alert for any lingering threats. But the streets remained calm, as if the city itself was exhaling after the storm. The scattered raindrops on the windows caught streetlight like falling stars. They were turning onto the private approach to Enzo's building when Naomi finally spoke again, voice soft but certain. "We'll need to revise the breakfast routine, earlier start time for council meetings." Enzo's quiet laugh held warmth and wonder. Even after everything, she was thinking of practical details, of maintaining the small rituals that kept them human. "Whatever you say, you're the expert on normal." 3 weeks later, morning light spilled through the lighthouse windows, painting the kitchen in soft gold. The old stone walls held warmth from the rising sun, and waves crashed against the rocky point where their new home stood sentinel over the coastline. Naomi arranged fresh bread and coffee on the kitchen table, their ritual unchanged, despite everything else that had shifted. The space was different from the penthouse's sleek modernity. Here, exposed, beams met whitewashed walls, and copper pots hung from iron hooks. It felt lived in, personal in a way the tower of glass and steel never had. Enzo descended from his morning security check of the lighthouse's upper levels, his footsteps familiar on the spiral stairs. The changes in him were subtle but profound. Shoulders looser, eyes clearer from actually sleeping. He'd dissolved the bloated council within days of the warehouse fight, replacing it with a tight circle of 5 who'd sworn loyalty not just to him, but to Naomi's safety and their shared vision. "The shelter funding came through," he said, accepting the coffee she handed him. "All legitimate now, properly registered. The board's yours to direct." Naomi nodded, thinking of the women and children who would benefit from what had once been laundered charity money. "The first facility opens next month. We'll need to hire more counselors." Their new routine had settled into something sustainable. Each weekend they drove to her aunt's house, where her brother tackled advanced mathematics with the tutor Enzo had found. a retired professor who specialized in gifted education. The boy was thriving, his nightmares fading, as security became normal rather than suffocating. The transfer of power had been surprisingly smooth. Valentina had requested a private meeting where honesty flowed both ways. Her graceful public withdrawal paved the way for others to accept the new order. Roth's prosecution moved through careful channels that kept Naomi's name out of all documentation, though his confession had been complete. Enzo watched Naomi move through their kitchen, still sometimes struck by the reality of her choosing to stay. The lighthouse deed bore both their names, his insistence, her right. The renovation had been their first shared project, turning the historic structure into a home that balanced security with warmth. "Your brother's toast yesterday," Enzo said softly, "about sleeping without bad dreams." "I know." Naomi touched his shoulder as she passed. It meant everything. The wedding had been small, intimate. They'd exchanged vows in the lighthouse keeper's garden, roses climbing old stone walls while waves provided percussion. No media, no politics, just family and the handful of people they truly trusted. The reception was a simple dinner where laughter flowed freely. Her brother had risen, glass of sparkling cider in hand, and spoken about finally feeling safe enough to sleep through the night. There hadn't been a dry eye at the table. Naomi's security detail was smaller now but elite, hand-picked women who'd proven themselves in crisis. They patrolled the grounds with precision while maintaining careful distance from the family's private spaces. The balance felt right, protection without imprisonment. Later that night, in their bed, with moonlight streaming through lighthouse windows, Enzo had whispered the words that once marked his desperation: "I'd give up my empire for your touch." But now it was simply truth, because he already had, dismantling every part of his kingdom that couldn't accommodate their love, rebuilding around a core of honor instead of fear. The lighthouse beam swept regular patterns through the dark, each circuit a reminder of home and safety. Naomi thought of her mother's necklace, now joined by her wedding ring, symbols of where she'd come from and where she'd chosen to be. Their morning routine continued. Coffee, quiet conversation, plans for the day ahead. Enzo's phone occasionally lit with updates from his streamlined operation, but he'd learned to let non-urgent matters wait until after breakfast. This time was sacred, a daily reminder to remain human. Through the windows, they could see the city skyline in the distance, close enough to manage business, far enough to maintain perspective. Waves crashed against their rocky point in eternal rhythm while seabirds wheeled overhead. The lighthouse kitchen filled with morning light as they shared this peaceful moment. Coffee steam curled between them like incense, marking the ritual that had begun on a sleepless night of fear and evolved into their daily renewal of choice and trust. Naomi moved to lock the heavy lighthouse door from the inside, the action both practical and symbolic. Outside, white spray flew up from the rocks as waves met stone. The beacon above would soon power down for the day, having kept its nightly vigil over dark waters. They walked hand in hand toward their bedroom, steps aligned and unhurried. Every inch of their path was known. From the night they met over broken glass to the warehouse battle that broke old chains, from quiet breakfast to public declarations, from fear to trust to love, they moved forward together, certain of where they'd been and where they were heading next. The morning light caught Naomi's wedding ring as they climbed the spiral stairs, throwing rainbow fragments across whitewashed walls. Each step took them higher in their private tower, their sanctuary against the world's storms. The waves below kept their steady rhythm, marking time in their eternal dance with the rocky shore.